Okay, it's been a while. I have uploaded already the module for this particular chapter. Lesson 1 pa lang yung may upload ko yata. Chapter 3 is all about economic study methods. The first lesson is not yet actually, it's just an introductory lesson for chapter for the different methods, economic study methods, aside from the concepts we have learned in chapter 2, we also need this concept of depreciation to as a preliminary concepts or a prerequisite concept that we need to understand before we proceed to economic study methods. So let's discuss first about depreciation. So what is depreciation? Depreciation is the decrease in value of physical property with the passage of time. Okay, so if you have a physical property, about my laptop, cell phone, chair, building, so any physical property that you have, the value decreases relative to time. So how do we account for the how do you call this, the value, yung value na nawawala, every year or every certain period of time? Then we will discuss the different methods here. Okay, so you know so don't look for somebody who sees you as a property, meron ba? If someone sees you as a property, then you do not settle with that because your value decreases with time. No. So don't ever settle with someone who considers you as a property. Okay? So that's a life advice from this topic. Okay? So let's try to define some terms here which will be used later on in our future discussions. Value. So value in commercial sense is the present worth of all future profits that are to be received through ownership of a particular property. Okay, the present worth. Okay, it is the present worth of all future profits that are to be received through ownership at a particular property. Okay, next is market value. So the market value of a property is the amount of which a willing buyer, so take note, a willing buyer will pay to a willing seller for the property where each has equal advantage. Okay, this is very ideal and is under no compulsion to buy or sell. So take note that that market value, both the buyer and the seller agrees to a certain amount. So each has equal advantage, although this is quite ideal because most of the time, if not always, there's still some sort of level of inequality in terms of the advantage for both parties, no, the buyer and the seller. The utility or use value of a property is what the property is worth to the owner as an operating unit. Okay. Fair value is the value which is usually determined by disinterested third party in order to establish a price that is fair to both seller and buyer. So both, so there is pag hindi nag-agree yung dalawang party, willing buyer and then willing seller, so hindi sila the buyer and the seller doesn't agree to a certain price or amount, then they usually look for a third party disinterested, to avoid bias, third party in order to establish the price. Okay, establish the price. Siya yung bibigay ng suggestion kung ano dapat yung presyo or amount ng property. Next would be book value. So book value, sometimes called the depreciated book value, is the worth of a property as shown in the accounting records of an enterprise. So yung book value, for example, you bought a property, a building for example, or a laptop or a cell phone. Okay, so after 1 year of use, syempre yung presyo niya Hindi na yun yung original price na pinambili mo. So nag-depreciate na yung value niya. Okay. So yung price niya after 1 year of usage, yun yung book value. No? We call that the book value. And then the salvage value or resale value is the price that can be obtained from the sale of a property after it has been used. Salvage value is the sometimes yung salvage value and scrap value are the same, no? Parehas lang yung definition nila. Yung salvage value is the price after yung useful life ng property. Okay. For example, yung isang property ang useful life lang niya ay 10 years. Okay. So after 10 years hindi na economically viable na gamitin yung property, then you have to let go of it, sell it kung meron pang gustong bumili. Okay, because some parts of it might be useful for other purposes. It can be recycled or reused yung ibang parts. So the value you get from it after its useful life, we call that the salvage value, or sometimes resale value or scrap value. So scrap value is the amount of the property would sell for or dispose as junk. So pag junk na siya, so usually recycle na lang yung property. Okay. Ayan. So this would be the terms that will be used later on. I hope you can pwede nyo ma-identify yung mga differences between these terms. No? Okay, so next. Okay, the other concepts, you may just read it in your modules, no? Para hindi masyadong mahaba yung video natin, yung discussions natin. In case you have questions, you may just ask in our group chats or in the comment section in the video. Okay, we'll just discuss the things that are necessary or that are needed later on sa mga future discussions natin. Although the other sections or paragraphs which were not read are also important naman, so for you to understand the different concepts more clearly, you know. Okay, another concept is the physical and the economic life of a certain property. So physical life of a property is the length of time during which it is capable of performing the function for which it was designed and manufactured. So length of time, so kung ilang taon or buwan, sometimes buwan, it can perform kahit na hindi na siya economically viable. For example, yung property natin after siguro mga 20 years, although nagpo-produce pa siya ng outputs or ng products, pero yung nagagastos mo ay mas malaki na compared sa nagagawa niyang products, then pwede pa rin naman siyang gamitin, pero hindi na siya economically viable, no? Pero yung physical life niya hanggang talagang masira na siya, talagang hindi na siya hindi na siya makapag-produce ng anumang output or product, no? So that's the physical life of a property. Yung economic life naman is the length of time during which a property may be operated at a profit. So meron kang profit. Sa physical life, pwedeng panggamitin pero lugi ka na. No. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Okay? So requirements of a depreciation method para kapag gumawa ka ng economic analysis. So ito yung requirements natin for kasi we have different methods to when you choose a depreciation method, it should be simple, it should recover capital, yung investment natin. The book value will be reasonably close to the market value at any time. So kapag yung book value niya, ano yung book value? Yan yung value ng property after a certain amount of time. After 2 years, for example, ganito yung amount. So dati, like, say for example, 1,000, after 2 years, naging 1,500 na lang siya. So the 1,500 is the book value. And it should be close, no, reasonably close to the market value at any time. Okay, so kung anong dinidikta na price sa market, yun close dapat siya dun sa book value. Okay. So the method should be accepted by the Bureau of Internal Revenue, BIR, since we are governed by certain laws, no, financial laws. Okay, then it should somehow, or it should, no, it should be accepted. It should conform to the Bureau of Internal Revenue and other financial authorities, no? Okay, so those are the requirements. Now let's go to the different depreciation methods. So first method is, before we go to the different depreciation method, let's try to familiarize muna dun sa different notations natin na gagamitin natin later on sa mga different depreciation methods. L, capital letter L, is the useful life of the property in years. Okay, useful life of the property in years. So it may be economic life. Usually that's the economic life, no? And then the original C sub O is the original cost. C sub L is the value at the end of the life. The scrap value including gain or loss due to removal. Okay? So take note, including gain or loss due to removal. So, halimbawa, pa yung scrap ba, pag binenta mo yung property, meron kang na-gain, so include that. No? And then, or loss naman, kapag, although meron siyang scrap value or salvage value, but you still have to remove it and it requires labor or other machineries to remove it, you still pay for that labor or machinery, then you should include yung lost amount of money or value because of the removal, no? Okay, and then small letter D here is the annual cost of depreciation. So take note, this is annual. So usually we compute depreciation in terms of years, no, annually. So the annual cost, D. C sub N is the book value at the end of N years. So C sub N, book value. And D sub N, capital letter D sub N, is the depreciation up to the age of N years. So for example, after 2 years, what would be the depreciation after 3 years, after 5 years? So D sub N ang notation natin dyan. So ito C sub N kapag 2 years, book value after 2 years, then C sub 2. Book value after 3 years, then C sub 3 yan. Dito rin sa may capital letter D sub N. So D sub 2 kapag depreciation after 2 years. D sub 3 kapag depreciation after 3 years, and so on. Okay? So those are our notations, no? Anyway, open notes naman, you should open notes naman, no? So you can just revisit those notations later on if you're confused. Okay, so the first method is the straight line method. I think this is the simplest method, no, in computing depreciation. So this method assumes that the loss in value is directly proportional to the age of the property. So there is a direct relationship between the age and the property. Okay? So that we compute for the depreciation, ganito lang kasimple yung depreciation using straight line method. It's equivalent to yung original cost natin, yung capital, lahat na yung capital, minus yung salvage value kung meron, or scrap value, basta yung value at the end of the economic life or useful life ng isang property. Okay, so yung original cost minus yung salvage value divided by the length, no? So since direct naman yung relationship between the age and the value and the age of the property. Okay, so that the book value depreciation up to any years. No? So any year, 2 years, after 3 years, after 4 years, after 5 years, is just a product of N and D. So kung gusto mong malaman ang depreciation after 2 years, then N would be 2 and D would be the depreciation, annual depreciation. No? Okay? And the book value is simply equal to, yung book value natin, CN, is equal to CO, yung original cost natin or the capital, minus the book value or minus the depreciation with a certain year. No, ito. Okay? So that's very simple. Now let's try to have an illustrative problem for this particular method. Okay, a new machine costs 8 million pesos, has a useful life of 10 years, and can be sold for 750,000 pesos at the end of its useful life. It is expected that 250,000 pesos will be spent to dismantle and remove the machine at the end of its useful life. Compute the book value after 3 years. Construct also a straight line depreciation schedule for this machine. Okay, so let's first solve for the salvage value. No? So yung salvage value natin, CL. Okay, teka lang. So let's solve first for the depreciation, annual depreciation. So ano yung annual depreciation? That is CO, that's original cost natin, which is 8 million, minus yung salvage value natin all over yung useful life L. But you see, although meron tayong salvage value na 750,000, okay, may salvage value at the end of its useful life, kailangan pa natin ng 250,000 para ma-dismantle at maalis yung machine wherever it is located. So let's just compute first for the net salvage value, ano? So ang salvage value natin, of course, we need to account for the cost of removal or dismantling of the machine. So we have 750,000 minus 250,000. So the salvage value then is we have 500,000 pesos. Okay? Now we can compute for the annual depreciation D. So we have 800 million, 8 million I should say, minus our salvage value na 500,000 divided by, we have a useful life of 10 years. So the annual depreciation is 750,000 pesos. Okay? Okay. Next, the problem is asking us to solve for the book value after 3 years. Okay. So the book value is, how do you solve for the book value? Kailangan muna natin isolve yung depreciation after 3 years. And how do we do that? We simply multiply. So the depreciation after 3 years is equal to 3 tuloy. Dn muna is equal to n times d. So since we're solving for the depreciation after 3 years, d sub 3 na lang dito. That's 3 times the depreciation. So we have 750,000 in depreciation natin. So the depreciation after 3 years is, we have 2 million, wait lang, 2,225,000 150,000. That's the depreciation after 3 years. So that the book value after 3 years, C3, ay, kung natin yung formula, CN is CO minus DN. Okay, so since we are solving for the book value after 3 years, then C3 is equal to CO, original cost natin is 8 million pesos. Minus DN, which is D3 in this case, we have 2,225,000. So C3, ito na lang. So the book value after 3 years is 5,750,000. So from 8 million nung first year, nung kaka-invest pa lang or kakabili pa lang, magiging 5,750,000 na lang ang value niya after 3 years. So nag-depreciate yung kanyang value. Okay? So next is we are also required to construct a straight line depreciation schedule for this machine. So tabulate natin at from the first year hanggang dun sa end ng useful life niya, magkano kaya ang depreciation each year at magkano yung book value niya for each year, no? Okay, so how do we do that? So, meron na akong ginawang table, no? Nasa module naman na yan. Okay, so usually yung content na, although may mga different formats, but usually ang basic content niyan ay yung depreciation charge every year, which in this case sa straight line method pare-parehas yan. Yung depreciation niya each year ay pare-parehas. And then we have the accumulated depreciation for each year. Is actually DN. So kapag D1, 750,000. This is D2, D3, D4, D5, and so on. And this is actually CN. So this is C1, C2, C3, C4, C5 until the end. Okay? So how do you compute? So constant ito, yearly depreciation, annual depreciation. DN is we simply multiply itong year dito. Year 2, 2 times 750,000, ito na yon. 3 times 750,000, ito na yon. 4 times 750,000, ito na yon. So and so on. Okay? And then book value, very simple. Ano bang formula natin for CN? CN is just equal to CO minus DN. So pag first year, C1 natin is 8 million minus DN, D1. Then for second year, book value 8 million minus this, yan na yon. 8 million minus this, yan yung book value at the end of 3 years. Sa fourth year, 8 million minus this, yun na yung book value on the fourth year. Okay? And so on hanggang matapos sa useful life niya. So dun sa sa 10th year, syempre sa 10th year, yun na yung end ng useful life. Yun na yung 500,000 na compute natin kanina. Okay? Salvage value niya. Okay? So at the end of 10 years, meron na lang siyang value na 500,000. Okay. Hindi yata nakita yung arrow doon. Doon. Nag-compute tayo ng salvage value. Okay? So that's it. So that is a straight line method. Other methods will be discussed na lang in a separate video. Okay?